Hello, 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 and welcome to Pop Culture Therapy. I'm Cruellica Kain.
Hello, everybody. It's Advent Nebula.
It's been a few weeks, but life has been kind of crazy.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later.
But what we're going to actually talk about for today's episode is the change in pop culture, or Hollywood now, that movie theaters could be diminishing and streaming services could be taking over as the platform du jour to see new movies when they come out.
Yeah, and I'm thinking it's one of those, it's a COVID effect, because a lot of people realize the comfort of your home watching these in here, and realistically, it's not that expensive to put up a home theater system in your house or apartment anymore. It's really inexpensive.
It's very inexpensive. It's very easy. And I think one of the things that people have noticed from COVID, well, there's a couple of things that have been noticed. One, you don't have to go into a theater with a lot of strangers you don't know, especially still in the active stage of COVID, and have a potential situation where you could get sick because the stranger beside you, because there is no spacing between seats anymore. It's free for all, everybody sits everywhere. So you don't know these people, you don't know what they have, and that's a fear a lot of people have.
It's not going to go away.
It's not going to go away. And even if COVID does get fixed, so to speak, and changes and is less deadly as it is right now, we're going to be dealing with this for another couple of years. And the other thing that I think you may have noticed in theaters, but I can guarantee you I've noticed.
I've only been to the theater twice.
Oh, we try to go, but we try to sit away from people just because of my fear. Is that I now remember why I didn't like going to movies sometimes. And that's people talking or being loud.
Or that occasional baby you'll have in there, and like, why is there a baby in an R-rated movie?
Yes, and I know these are like bitchy things because this happened all the time pre-COVID, but when you're locked up in your home for a year and you're kind of spoiled watching movies on your own, you don't think about the conflict of all the people again.
I'll admit, just myself, I spent the $30 for Black Widow just to watch it myself, and I went meh when the movie was over.
Well, yes, and that's the other thing you have to think of. There are many movies out there that people are hesitant on. Truthfully, half of the new movies that come out in a year, Kaiju and I don't go to the theaters and see. We wait for the video release, and then we rent them from the library. So we don't rent them from like a Redbox or anything like that. We wait to the library, who's free, to have them available.
And then there's my situation, it's like, I've seen Mortal Kombat and Godzilla vs. Kong in theaters, and then the next movie is going to be Suicide Squad. So I've been very picky on...
Well, and that's what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah.
So the reason why we're talking about this is because of the most recent articles that have come out about Scarlett Johansson suing Disney over them releasing Black Widow on their streaming service simultaneous to their movie release in theaters.
And join her in the lawsuit, which just came out today as we're recording this. Emma Stone is going to be joining her
Or
in the lawsuit.
considering it, at least. But most likely she will.
Yep.
I think it's a matter of what you feel you're comfortable with. Now, the challenge with this is they're right and they're wrong. And this, I'm saying this for both Disney and for Scarlett Johansson because she's officially suing. So in reading the numerous articles out there about the complaints, she is suing for lost income based on the fact that it is being rented for $30 a pop on Disney Plus, whereas you go to a theater and you're paying per person for tickets. And Disney's response was that, well, it's still COVID, there's still a pandemic, not all theaters are open, so we wanted to ensure the largest population saw the movie. We had to adapt for this.
And I get Disney's point on this because as of right now, nationwide, only between 1/3 and just under a half of all the theaters nationwide are actually open.
And even open, not all of their actual theater rooms are open because there's not enough movies available right now that are driving people to go back. Also, as we talked about with the pandemic, there's not enough people who truly feel comfortable. Myself and Kaiju are the same way. We are very cautious of the movies that we go to see. We want to go to see movies, but you gotta be smart about it.
Yeah.
And so Disney's response, I'm going to look at it twofold because there are some people who make comments that are very true. One, yes, legitimate point. There's a pandemic going on, so they have to maximize what they're doing. However, the counterpoint to that is in Florida, the moment that crazy Florida governors said, let's open everything up, Disney shot their wad and opened their theme park.
Yeah.
But to play devil's advocate with regards to their theme park, not that I think it was smart, so please do not believe that, they were hemorrhaging money. And even their employees were hemorrhaging money. Because while there's unemployment, that doesn't necessarily fix the problem that they're out of work. And the longer a theme park is closed, the more opportunity is for everything they have to go into disrepair.
Yeah, those machines require consistent maintenance to stay afloat.
It's not, and unfortunately when you have a theme park closed, yes, you have some people that are like a skeleton crew still maintaining certain things, but you have a skeleton crew for almost a city-sized park.
Yeah, that's the largest theme park in North America.
So yes, they were doing it. They did it stupid and smart at the same time. However, when it came to the streaming platform, they've been very honest about this.
Yeah,
to the point of saying we're going to release movies together what they go to theaters. Their first one, as an example, was Mulan.
Yeah, and even with Pixar, they've been like, if we don't see, and most recently Luca, they did not see enough of a following to get families into the theaters, so they popped them straight onto their streaming platform.
And yes, it's frustrating, and yes, it does actually take money away from the actors or actresses that participate in this. I am 100% for the actors and actresses having the rights of maintaining a living wage. However, it's not solely just Disney's responsibility to adapt. And this is where the unpopular opinion comes in. Because yes, Disney holds the responsibility of saying, we have adapted, this is what we're going to do. If they did or did not do that, we don't know. We're taking one piece of a story written by newspapers with whatever dialogue the attorney is providing. And when you read a complaint, having gone to law school, the complaint is going to have a lot of wording in there that can be taken to incredible lengths of interpretation.
Legal jargon's designed for that, and especially in California where it's been like, okay, you're going to have to pick out the points that you know are absolute, not being able to be taken in 9-10 different directions by the lawyer.
Exactly. So having written a lot of complaints and a lot of legal documents in my life, it's very interesting the narrative you have to weave. That's why when you go into politics and you hear about bills being 5,000-6,000 pages, to me that's like, okay, that's actually kind of short in a way. Where to anyone else it's like, oh my god, it's 6,000 pages. You have to think about how much fluff goes into it because they're trying to fight their case. And to fight their case, they have to put everything in very lengthy narrative of saying what they did wrong.
And if any of you have ever read a law book or looked at legal jargon, there's a very specific way it has to be formatted and written on a sheet of paper.
That is very true. Now, this is not to say that Disney potentially didn't do their due diligence. We're not in the courtroom, so we were not part of any actual conversations. And truthfully, ScarJo probably didn't have much communication with this, because 9/10 of Hollywood is just lawyers talking. That's Hollywood. You have the stars and all the pretty people on screens doing what they're doing.
Lawyers and producers make up the rest of it.
They do. It is the lawyers who run Hollywood. That's why people have had so many complaints. What I have a concern of when it comes to the flip side is also Scarlett Johansson, aka her attorney's responsibility. If they knew a pandemic was going on, it's everywhere, it's in abundance, there is some responsibility of them saying, okay, can we renegotiate the contract? Because every contract is available for renegotiation as long as you provide a legitimate right, which a pandemic is a legitimate right. And in truth, most businesses are not going to go out of their way to renegotiate a contract unless the other party says we need to renegotiate. The only time you have seen this happen is when Legendary went after HBO for Dune.
Yeah.
And then for Wonder Woman, they didn't sue, but after they got scolded for it, they made their reparations. But in all honesty, a company is not going to go out of their way if the other party doesn't get involved.
Yeah. And you're seeing kind of Warner Brothers' response with Dune now, continuously pushing it back as a finger to Legendary Pictures.
Yeah. And so the responsibility of Scarlett Johansson's team, unpopularly, is that they should have realized there is a possibility with how many times the movie was delayed that it could have been released on a streaming platform as well. One of the things that's assumed in the complaint, or said in the complaint, some people have said they saw this email. I have not seen this email, so I can only take what's in the complaint, is that apparently Scarlett Johansson received an email from Marvel Studios, which is the division of Disney that handles the MCU, stating pre-COVID that the movie would only be released in theaters. And this is, mind you, pre-COVID.
And to understand further on why she'd get an email like this, she was one of the 4 executive producers for Black Widow.
Correct, yes. So, truthfully, she's getting double pay in a way. She's getting the actress pay along top of the
producer's pay. And where this is tying in is her actress pay was based on box office performance.
Correct. And to be fair, if you're not being paid enough money, absolutely. What my frustrations with this are, I'm going to go with the first one that's going to be the most unpopular of them all, and that is gender inequality. A lot of the arguments that I've seen on social media, even by people that we know, is that if this was a man doing this, let's say Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans, this wrong would be righted immediately. The answer to that is no.
No, Disney's too powerful. They'd be putting their foot down, and the same thing they're doing right now, they would have done the exact same thing.
And the reason why people are making this argument is that because we don't have any precedents.
Yeah.
Now, we could look at the one person of color who is a male who fought against Paramount for Iron Man 2, the original Rhodey. He quit because he was not getting an increase in pay.
and Terrence Howard decided to go do his own thing, and we got Don Cheadle replacing him.
Now, that was him choosing to walk away due to pay. That's the only kind of precedent we have, is if they know they're not getting enough money, they walk. But we don't have the reverse precedent of pandemic changes of now including the streaming service. And so to put gender into it without proof, and this is coming from a woman. I'm not like a diehard Gloria Steinem burn the bra feminist, but I am a feminist of believing in equality, equal pay, equal rights for everyone, no matter what their job is. So I can't agree that this wouldn't have happened if it was a man.
Yeah, I'm in the boat of, if it was a man filing about it, we wouldn't even be hearing about this, I don't think.
No, and the reason for that is men are not as vocal about these types of lawsuits as women are. We would hear like basic rumbling, but we would not hear enough because it would be settled out of court. And that is the only difference I would say for the gender inequality, is that the man, and you could speak to this being a man, would settle quicker out of court because of what's going to be the next unpopular opinion. But
yeah, it's like, and a lot of men in the business industry, we want anything kind of legal precedents to get over and done with as fast as possible, but without getting screwed.
Exactly. And this is where problem 2 comes in. It's unpopular, but sadly it's going to be more unpopular for this group than it will be for the future. And that is career suicide. It's not just because it's Disney, but it also is because it's Disney.
You're trying to take on the most powerful entertainment conglomerate in the world.
So you're fighting against them. And once again, I believe everybody should get paid. However, if your contract, and once again, we will never see the contract.
This isn't the state of Florida where it'd be public. It's California. This thing's locked away.
Yeah, they're very private about that. Now, if somebody on her team leaked the contract, that's a completely different story.
And that's a completely different other law matter that could happen.
Yes. But because we don't have the physical writing of the contract, and even if we did, it'd be as clear as mud, it should have provided assumptively something about box office, home release, and streaming. Now, obviously, streaming today is different than it would have been a year ago or 2 years
more likely about 3.5 to 4 years ago when she's more likely signed this contract.
Exactly. So streaming would have been a whole different animal. But usually some of these contracts, from what I've read in the past or what I've heard about, is that they include the box office sales, and not everyone gets box office sales. So like people were mentioning about Florence Pugh, she's not as high of an actress as Scarlett Johansson.
Usually in these, from my understanding, and this is the entire spectrum of Hollywood, the producers and the top billed actors are the only ones that get the box office revenue pay.
And usually the box office revenue, depending on it, is maybe like $1 or 50 cents. It's like a small percentage because obviously the theaters have to get paid first, then the distributors, then the company. The likely phrase is shit rolls downhill. But so that's why a lot of people also bank on home video release, because home video release is what has saved so many movies in the past.
Austin Powers being one of the most famous examples.
Oh, absolutely. Because home video release is what proves to a movie studio that, okay, this wasn't a flop. Because technically in MCU terms, Black Widow, even with the streaming aspect, is the biggest flop throughout the entire franchise. And I think the argument here that Scarlett Johansson's making is because since more people were not able to go to the theaters and see it because they had an alternative, that's why it dropped sales.
Yeah. And then you also got to look on the flip side of this too. Another thing in the contract, and this is what saved a lot of franchises and movies too, but streaming's kind of taken this over, but back in the day, cable TV airing was another one that determined.
Oh, yes. Because you had the Nielsen ratings.
Yeah.
So the reason why we're talking about this before getting to the matter at hand, career suicide, is because it's important to see all of the pieces together. The reason I say it's career suicide, and we can use Mickey Rourke as a perfect example.
Mickey Rourke came back and he committed career suicide pretty much with opening his mouth.
Then we also have Robert Downey Jr. He committed career suicide decades ago.
It took a real risk when Marvel brought him back on.
No, it was Paramount.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Paramount before Marvel Studios, yeah. Because Robert Downey Jr., his drug and alcohol addiction after Ally McBeal, pretty much he was blacklisted by Hollywood after Ally McBeal.
And there's so many actors and actresses. Johnny Depp is a current example of career suicide. It's not even his fault, and it's career suicide. Yeah. Now, career suicide doesn't mean they'll never get a role again. That's not the legitimacy of it. What we mean by career suicide is that if you put your nose out there as a whistleblower, somebody who is going to be very vocal, like Rose McGowan.
Topher Grace, who can't get work anymore.
And talk about things very vocally about what they don't like in Hollywood, they have a hard time finding work.
Sarah Michelle Gellar is a prime example. So the only work she's getting is voiceover work now.
Yeah.
And it's because in politics... in Hollywood, stating your political opinion in Hollywood can kill your career.
So, career suicide is a huge risk that all actors and actresses take. Because if you are very vocal... Well, look at... actually, here's another good example. Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus, she's in everybody's lane now, but she has gone up and down so many times in her young career because she's been very vocal, she's been very extra. The only reason she's still around right now is because Hollywood finds her to be okay, tolerable. But for a number of years, she couldn't get anything. Taylor Lautner, he can barely get anything if he does work, and he had claimed a fame with Twilight. You also have Shia LaBeouf.
Shia LaBeouf really, his antics on set work, especially with Fury, before he had to do the film or he had to direct the film himself to actually get it produced recently.
And then you have Robert Pattinson. When you are very vocal or you do something extremely unpopular in Hollywood, which these court cases are, you have Disney one that's going to be against you. And even if she were to win, let's say she were to win, and I hope she does in her own way because she has that right if it's proven that they
breached the contract.
However, the risk she's taking is high. Because Disney makes, I would say, probably about 45% of the movies at this time. Yes, you have Sony, you have Paramount, you have other companies that make movies, but they're going to just be as hesitant because just like whistleblowers, and it's terrible to mix this together, but whistleblowers, this is why you very rarely know their identities. Because the moment you get outed as a whistleblower, nobody wants to touch you with a 10-foot pole. Because they can't trust you. And they're going to worry about you potentially stabbing them in the back if you somehow don't get your way. Right or wrong, that's the concern.
Biggest example whistleblower we had, Edward Snowden.
He can never come back to the United States to see his family. Ever. And so it's terrible, but career suicide is there. And both her and Emma Stone have prolific careers. They've done a lot of good things, but at the same time, they've also made some poor choices with being in movies that cause whitewashing, being in films that were panned worldwide. So the other thing you have to come together with is, what's your risk? Because you could walk away, and that's their choice, but they're still risking a lot even walking away because their name is out there as causing a big huff. And I'd be curious, I haven't seen many other actors and actresses coming up to their defense. Admittedly, I haven't gone too far on my way of looking, but from the articles I've read, not too many have.
And it'll be curious, considering this has only developed over the last 2 to 3 days, what the fallout's going to be over the next week on this, or if this just gets swept under the rug in the media.
Well, and that's the other thing. When we have things like this pop out, and it frustrates me when people who know these things still jump on the bandwagon, is think about why this is being the headline news story and not other things. Because anytime you see a headline news story like this, you wonder, what are we missing?
Well, I can tell you one thing. Coal strike been going on for 4 months in Alabama. Nobody's reporting on it.
Because celebrity life is more popular. So now I am going to defend ScarJo here for one fact. A lot of people have been making comments. Kaiju is one of them, and I can understand where people are coming from. So they're not wrong, but I can understand is I don't think she's necessarily doing it for the money. I think she's trying to prove a point. But the problem is a lot of people are more angry with her than they are Disney. Or the people who are mad at Disney are going on this bandwagon of, I'm going to not support anything they've done. And I'm like, you do know how much both parties have brought to the pop culture media. And you have to be careful of the sides you take. I don't think she's doing it for money, but I think it's going to be a cruel lesson learned at the end of this all.
Yeah, she can end up having a Robert Downey Jr. effect where your career is dead for 10 years.
And it would be, but then again for women, and this is the only thing I do have a frustration with within Hollywood, is very few women have strong, healthy careers after the age of 50.
Not everybody's Tilda Swinton.
Tilda Swinton, Meryl Streep, Susan Sarandon. Not every woman has the luxury. And yes, that is the biggest frustration for me. And that is a whole nother argument. But my concern is the risk reward. And people could say, well, she's worth $165 million. What does she need $50 more million for? And that is not for us to decide.
That's basically for them to decide. We're just the normal people that just gawk at celebrity lives.
Well, yeah. Because truthfully, $50 million spread across 100, 200,000 people, or even 1 million, would benefit their livelihoods. And I think that's where a lot of people are coming with being pissed off at her, is because so many people have suffered in the pandemic, and hearing about a celebrity saying, I didn't get a proposed amount of 50 million.
And then you're hearing about Dolly Parton giving away $50 million for children's literature this past week.
It's kind of like that slap in the face of, you are complaining about an extreme amount of money that most people will never see in their lives.
Yeah, and then another celebrity gives away $50 million of their fortune for children's literature. And
so I can understand where people are coming from that. But I think she's trying to prove a point. My concern is I don't think she's going about it the right way. But then again, we don't know the contract. We have people telling us it's a breach of contract, but in all honesty, it's hearsay. Unless we can actually see receipts saying it's a breach of contract, we can't say for sure. But I think it is going to change the dynamic of contracts going forward.
Yeah.
As it should.
Yeah. I mean, streaming is going to be the future. Theaters are on their last legs, and I think this pandemic's kind of proved it. They'll still be around, but they aren't going to be the prolific thing in about 10 years.
Well, no, because as you said at the beginning of our podcast, home theaters are becoming much more sophisticated.
You can set up a projector-style home theater setup in your own home for under $2,000 nowadays.
Oh, absolutely. And you could get like a really good sound system, a great 4K scale television, or even 8K.
Or an 8K projector. 8K projectors are down in price to under $1,000 in some instances.
So you can get so much quality from home. And if nothing else, you can just invite friends and family over and have a great event localized, which could cost you, yes, let's say $30 for Disney Plus's added content for that movie, and whatever you buy in food to share amongst yourselves. Because if you go to a movie theater, it's $30 just for one person.
Yeah.
Because you are getting popcorn, you're getting something to drink, you're getting something to eat, and then your movie ticket, because unless you go to matinee pricing, which is like $5-6 at times.
The food prices where theaters make their rent.
Well, exactly. And so weigh your options. And so I'm hoping this cruel lesson learned does help with contract writing in the future. That all of the actors and actresses that are watching this precedent take place look at it and say, okay, how do I renegotiate this? And while it will frustrate the primary companies that manage all of this, they have to know in reality to expect it. And I don't think it should just be the top name actor or actresses. I think everybody should be able to have a little bit more equality. And the other thing that I think this can do is also even out the playing field a little bit for more up and coming actors and actresses that tend to make cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
At least if more people are doing this streaming, that you can look at alternatives. Not everyone needs to make, and this is coming from my anarchistic side, not everybody needs to make a $50 million for a movie. You are play acting for, let's say, 3 months.
And you're in front of a green screen for the majority of your filming.
Yeah, so in my anarchistic moment, I'm just going to say it's greed.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's the intent, but that's how I feel about it.
So, unfortunately, our next episode is going to be kind of on a downer topic, too.
I know!
But we're going back to the state of California. Talking about Blizzard. Activision.
I know, and then every other video game company there within.
But, and while you know, and because all of the court case the state of California has filed is completely public domain right now, we'll get into that next episode.
So until then, bye!